Hey, yo, Fro Wrestling Podcast listeners, help us out and click subscribe to show your support. Welcome to another Going Live episode of the Fro Wrestling Podcast. Tonight, we're going to cover all sorts of topics in the world of professional wrestling. We have some great fan questions this week that have been submitted. Thank you to those people who send the questions in. If you are a member of Facebook, we always encourage you to check out the Titans of Podcasts and Wrestling fan group that is available to all Facebook subscribers. There's some great information there, great podcasts, tons of my buddies out there who do a really great job of bringing you guys all the perspective on the world of professional wrestling. And if you are a wrestling fan playing wrestling video games, whether it's the 2K games or anything of the sort, and you want to stop paying $60 to $100 a year to get a game, shoot over to Facebook and check out Wrestler Unstoppable, completely free unless you choose to invest money in it. And it is a cool game where you get to get yourself into storylines, win championships, compete on pay-per-views, tournaments, you name it, join companies, sign contracts, have feuds, the whole nine. Check it out, Wrestler Unstoppable on Facebook. So, and if you have not yet, shoot over to patreon.com/Fro Wrestling Podcast, and we would love to have you become a member of the Fro Wrestling Podcast family. We are dying to see how many people get in there by the end of the summer. As a school teacher, the summertime is my big time to try to get you guys to be the number one focus that I have going on. And I've got such great listeners every week. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to every single episode. It has been fantastic. Thank you so much. This episode, I also want to let you guys know, absolutely every week has been phenomenal watching this Intercontinental Tournament that you guys are voting for each week. The round 3 matches are now up and they are live as we speak. So if you are a Patreon member, they were able to go on as of Thursday and start voting. If ever you are not, pop on now. You can go on and vote for the great matches coming up in round 3 of our fantasy booking tournament for the best Intercontinental champions of all time. If you would like to call in with questions, comments, concerns, anything you want us to cover, we have the Fro Wrestling Sound Off line at 267-642-1160. That's where you can give us everything you want us to cover. It is a talk-to-text service. You call in, you leave your voice message, it'll convert it for me into text. It'll pop up on my screen here, and we can address it immediately as it happens. And I want to try to get that as many opportunities to do that with you guys every live episode that we can, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. If you have not checked out the new website yet, frowrestling.com, I'm so proud that nobody had taken that name because, you know, it's mine. You know, I'm not too greedy, but frowrestling.com, that's my space, you know, that's where I'm going to be putting it down. So if you haven't checked it out yet, please do give me some feedback on it in the comments section on YouTube, or if you want to send a direct message through the Sound Off line, that's fine as well. I welcome any and everything that my listeners want to send me because I appreciate your honest, constructive criticism, and I've been getting so much positive feedback. You guys are awesome. If I didn't know better, I'd swear you guys are just giving me good comments just to make me feel good. But I will tell you, you have taken a guy who's got such a passion for professional wrestling and given me something so special to share with you guys every week. So thank you once again. I want to get right into the news and rumors of the week. It's been a crazy week. I'm going to apologize. We're going live late again. It's like the third week in a row I'm going live late, but you know, at the end of the day, life is crazy in the summertime for a teacher, and I wanted to make sure that I get you the best information, and I didn't want to rush through things. I want to make sure my segments are ready to go. I want to make sure the topics we cover are ready to go, and I wanted to make sure I got to look through all the questions that were sent into our talk to text line, because there were some really good ones this week, and I want to make sure we get to as many of those as we can. One of the big tidbits this week, Braun Strowman, apparently while they were in Tennessee for a show, Braun Strowman was at the bar after the show, maybe a little bit on the tipsy side, and apparently was approached by Karen Jarrett, Kurt Angle's ex-wife, now Jeff Jarrett's wife. I'll never get over how weird that is. And apparently she went up to Braun Strowman, was very, very candid with him about how much her son is a huge fan of Braun's, and asked him for an autograph. And depending on whose opinion, perspective, and report you're listening to, it could have gone down a couple different ways. I've heard the initial report was everybody was under the impression that Braun Strowman pretty much had no idea who she was, and that he was going to blow her off, and that she was very persistent about wanting to get this autograph from him. He blows her off, And then apparently he gave her some major attitude, dropped a few profane terms or whatnot, and she went off on him and really was cutting a promo on him, telling him how she was going to contact her ex-husband, Kurt Angle, let him know what he said to her and all this other stuff. You know, you disrespect me and our family and our kids and this and that. And what a bizarre situation. And the initial report said that Braun had literally gotten down on his hands and knees and begged her not to call Kurt Angle and report this. Now, later reports coming out, the Wrestling Observer has reported that it wasn't quite that dramatic as the early reports were indicating, and that it was more something along the lines of she was drunk, he was drunk, and they were having a drunken argument. I don't know what to believe. What I could think is, if it's more like the Wrestling Observer is reporting, where it wasn't so serious and it was just a shouting match between two people, probably gets brushed under the rug and it's bizarre, but still press. So, whatever. If Braun Strowman really was throwing out a profane-laden tirade against someone who he didn't realize was so connected, so to speak, then that's a concern for WWE, because if you're in a public place, a bar like that, a restaurant, something of that nature, you're an ambassador for the company. Look, I've had these debates with people about professional sports athletes in all walks of life. Yes, if you're a sports athlete, you are a role model for children, and you need to hold yourself to a higher standard. I have other people who say, hey, listen, they just do a job. They're paid to do. They're human too. They're allowed to say and do what they want. You know, they don't owe anybody anything. I get that as well. Here's the difference. When you are put in the position like someone like Braun Strowman on World Wrestling Entertainment, where you are becoming very popular very quickly, there are a lot of young people who are buying into Braun Strowman. Here's where it's different. When you go to WWE, there are ethics clauses in your contracts. They expect you to contribute a certain amount of time to Susan G. Komen, spend time with kids who are experiencing challenges, difficulties, and disabilities in their life. These are things that are all in every WWE talent contract. You're expected to be a role model and an ambassador for the company at all times. And here's the reality. Are they doing a job? Yes, they are. But here's the thing. You and I do jobs too. I don't know about you guys. I'm a school teacher. I know what I make, and I know I am certainly nowhere near the pay scale that Braun Strowman is. I know I work very hard, and I know I do my job every single day, but I also know, as a lowly school teacher, as some people would criticize me for, if I walk out in the middle of the street tomorrow and start shooting off profanity, my teaching career is in jeopardy. Because I'm a role model to my students. I'm an ambassador of my school district even when I'm not there. And I'm not a highly paid sports athlete. Braun Strowman is working for a publicly traded company, unlike the NFL, unlike Major League Baseball, unlike the NBA. WWE is a publicly traded company. That means you need to look good for the public. And in this situation, if it turns out that he was being a complete fool, well, that's a whole different case. Then you got an issue on your hands, because Braun Strowman needs to be that ambassador, the guy who the kids are going to want to come up to in the airport. They're going to want to talk to him. They're going to want to get his perspective, take a snapshot with him, and they don't want to hear that he's blowing people off. Horrible idea if that's what happened on his behalf. Moving on to the G1 Climax. For those who have been keeping up with it, it is a very exciting tournament. I'm very pleased with where it's at right now. Current standings in Block A, Hiroshi Tanahashi, a stalwart of the company for a long period of time, is leading Block A with 8 points. Zack Sabre Jr., Naito, Bad Luck Fale, Makabe, Hiroki Goto, and Tomohiro Ishii all have 6 points right behind him. That's 1 win away from tying Tanahashi. So Block A is completely up in the air. Now, when you go over to Block B, Kazuchika Okada leads also with 8 points. Kenny Omega and Evil are right behind him with 6 apiece. After that, everybody's at 4 or less. So Block B, I would say, is pretty much between Okada, Omega, and Evil, and I expect that they were giving Evil some of these wins just to elevate him a little bit on the card, potentially setting something up with he and his stablemate Tetsuya Naito later on in the year, potentially. They've been doing a lot of crossover with their whole faction and pairing them off in different matches and whatnot during this G1 Climax, and I think what they're realizing is they have some pretty good chemistry in the ring together, and that may be something you want to explore as you go forward. Okada and Omega will meet the final night. I think if Omega wins that match, he'll win Block B. I think coming out of Block A, at this point, there's something about it. It's telling me that either Zack Sabre Jr. or Tetsuya Naito is going to walk out with Block A, even though Tanahashi is leading right now. So it'll be very, very curious to watch that. The final match in Block A is Tanahashi taking on Naito, much like the Omega Okada situation. So I believe the winners of those two matches are probably the ones who come out of those blocks. I'm expecting it to be Omega and Naito. That's what I think New Japan is going to do. But the rest of the competition, I mean, regardless of what the win-loss records are and the point totals are, there are some phenomenal matches going on right now in the G1 Climax, and I really hope that you guys are checking out either on YouTube or something the matches that are going on, because you're missing some phenomenal wrestling action if you're not watching that right now. I want to get to my first question. I love this question. This comes to me from Carol. I'm going to read you. She writes, "Hi, my name is Carol. I'm from St. Louis, and here's my question. What if the WWE did a system like the English Premier League, where every few months a few wrestlers would drop down from Raw to SmackDown, and then from SmackDown to NXT, and others could be brought up through the rings, and that way, they can be fresh. You can see new matches, things like that." So is what she's getting at. Carol, I love your question. I saw your question when you sent it, and I got excited because that's the issue. And there's actually news referencing some of what she's saying this week. And so that's why her question is the best question I got this week. Thank you, Carol from St. Louis. The beautiful thing about her question is, right now, one of the big news stories is there's conversation about taking main roster talents who have not excelled on the main roster, or who have become stale, or who they don't plan on pushing, and moving them back to NXT. Now, what she is saying, which I think is an even better idea than what they're planning on doing, is actually having almost like in baseball, call-ups and sending people down to the minors and things like that. I think that's a fantastic idea. And do it on a scheduled basis. It's March. It's, pre-WrestleMania season. You're going to bring up a couple people to boost the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. It's SummerSlam. You've had people on the roster. They haven't performed the way you want. You're going to send them down so you can really focus on your key matches for SummerSlam, your second biggest pay-per-view of the year, but you don't have a match on that card that fills all the talent spots that Andre the Giant Battle Royal does. You get into Survivor Series. Maybe you bring up a bunch of NXT guys, and those guys, when they come up to the main roster, maybe they get into a traditional Survivor Series style match and get some exposure. See if they're people that you can keep out on the main roster, and if they're people you want to invest more television time in. You get to the Royal Rumble, again, you've got people you could bring up, bring down, do whatever you got to do. It's a great idea. I think that when I saw this question, I think, people are always looking for a way to make professional wrestling better, and I think Carol's idea here is fantastic. I think it's one that, fortunately, we here at the Pro Wrestling Podcast really appreciate. Unfortunately, I feel like WWE, Vince McMahon, is so set in his ways. He refuses to indoctrinate other new ideas into the equation almost ever, and it's really frustrating. We are in a new age and a new generation of wrestling fan. We are the smart marks. We are the people who follow the online communities. We follow all the web pages. We listen to podcasts like this and others. Not only do you listen to podcasts like this one, but we listen to podcasts by the men in the ring doing the action. Chris Jericho's podcast, Steve Austin's podcast. Maybe you tune into Jim Cornette's or Jim Ross's stuff. Whoever you're listening to, we're doing more now as wrestling fans than they ever have in the history of the business. So for Vince McMahon to simply negate our desires and thought process is really robbing himself of potentially more business. Now, I had a guy on Facebook who I got into a huge argument about this topic only recently because he was saying, oh no, they're making money hand over fist. We just had Q2's reports were announced. And again, WWE's reporting profitability through the roof. Of course they are. Because they're doing movies, and they're doing music, and they're doing downloadable content, and they're doing all these, Table for Three, and all this those kinds of programs are bringing in, I think, more viewers than the pay-per-views are to the network. And things of that nature. They're doing tons overseas, the United Kingdom, China, they're looking at India, they're looking at South Africa, they're looking at South America and Mexico. So all these places where WWE is putting their money, And then they have tournaments like the Mae Young Classic, the UK Championship Tournament, last year's Cruiserweight Classic. So they're doing things they've never done before, but here is the issue. At the box office, attendance is down. Raw viewership is down. I live in the Philadelphia marketplace. I can assure you that in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, when WWE would come to town, that place was sold out almost every month they came. And back in the 80s, they came around usually once a month. We saw them in Philadelphia at the Spectrum every single month. Before you left the show each night, there would be a ring announcer who would come out and, right before the main event, he would come out and say, "Thank you for coming to tonight's WWF show. Next month on, Saturday, whatever, pick the date, you'll see some of the following matches." And they would start announcing the match card for the next month's show. And it was always cool. You would hear, "This guy versus that guy." And you would get like little claps. Then you get to the middle of the card. The British Bulldogs versus the Hart Foundation. And then you get more claps. And you get that guy would be like, "And in the main event, Hulk Hogan will defend," and you would get an idea of what was coming every single month. And they don't do that now. And they don't sell out anymore like they used to. Wrestling fans, historic wrestling fans, a lot of people my age, I'm 40, but a lot of my listeners are my age, or they're my really young audience that are teens and early 20s. If you're my age, you remember those days. And you also remember the fact that part of why we're such raving lunatic fans like we are right now is because when we were kids growing up through this wrestling business, we were watching our shows 4 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Monday night for primetime wrestling. We had TNT, we had NWA Wildside, we had AWA during the week, we had World Class Championship Wrestling was on ESPN. Like, we had wrestling every day of the week if you really wanted it. And not only did you have it, but you were inundated with the live shows. Nowadays, WWE will come to Philadelphia like once every 6 months. So what do those Philly fans do for those other 5 months? They sit there with nothing. So that's where they start going to the Ring of Honor shows, the small independent shows. I'm negotiating with 2 independent promotions to try to broadcast live from their shows. I would love to do that. And it looks like something that may be soon in the works. Because we're starving for live wrestling action. So it's really a shame. It's a shame that it's gone the way it has. I hope that they figure out that they really need to do more to make things relevant and make things current. Let's see. I've got somebody sending me a question right now. Promotion and relegation. I like that. Promotion and relegation. We'll call that the plan that Carol was putting together, which I'm never going to get over because I think it's such a well thought out plan. I'm going to move on to some of the other news for the week. There is big rumors. Everybody was wondering why they did this Kurt Angle, Jason Jordan angle. If you tune in to see different wrestlers' reaction to it, Shane Douglas has been the most critical. He thinks it's a complete farce and ridiculous. And he thinks it makes WWE seem more cartoonish all over again. And it makes people, it implies that we're stupid as fans. Obviously Kurt Angle is not the father of Jason Jordan. Putting that on TV is stupid. It makes it a soap opera. Now, I'm not surprised because if you've ever gone to WWE's corporate website, it actually says on there that when you apply to be a creative writer, they want people with soap opera experience. Why? What the heck does a soap opera have to do with professional wrestling? Wait a minute. It's not professional wrestling anymore. It's sports entertainment. Nonsense. The reason people like in my marketplace in Philadelphia and others all over the country, and I know there's a lot of you listening who feel the same way I do, we want to see wrestling. I don't need to see in a 3-hour Raw episode an hour and 25 minutes worth of talking. I want to see in-ring action. I want to see the completely pointless matches. Dave Studemeyer versus the one-man gang, and gang squashes him in 30 seconds. I want to see those. Because it's at least wrestling. Apparently, the Jason Jordan Kurt Angle thing was designed to elevate Jason Jordan into a prime middle of the card position. And now the big rumor is at SummerSlam, Jason Jordan will get his shot at the Intercontinental Championship taking on The Miz, and is scheduled not only to get the match, but to win the championship. And that what this is designed to do is do 2 things. 1, give a push to Jason Jordan as the Intercontinental Champion. And 2, it creates an opportunity for The Miz to protest and boycott boycott Kurt Angle, saying that he cost him his championship by giving preferential treatment to his son, and it may be a way for him to request that Angle be removed of his duties, enter Stephanie McMahon, and we'll see where things go from there. But I don't mind the angle, but I don't think it had to be Kurt Angle's son. You know, it could have been one of these things where Kurt Angle brought in his hottest new recruit from wherever, and it could have done the exact same thing. You don't have to BS the fans and give them some nonsense about, oh, this is my illegitimate son. That's absolutely ludicrous. So I'm not a fan of that angle, but I don't have a problem with the Intercontinental title match at SummerSlam. I actually think that's somewhat of a good idea. Lucha Underground in the news this week. The president of El Rey Network was out talking about how Lucha Underground is one of the most successful programs on their network, and they are in negotiations. He feels strongly that there will be a season 4. My concern is it seems like it took forever just to watch the 2 parts of season 3. If they're going to continue to make programming, which I really hope they do, I enjoy their style. It's very different. You got to get it to television quicker. You can't be taking these 3-month hiatuses in the middle. It doesn't make sense. It's not good for business. Bad idea. Moving on, Medusa. Medusa's in the news this week. They've been doing a lot with Medusa now that she was at the Mae Young Classic. And now they're talking to her about, you know, how does she feel about the women's revolution? How does she feel about the talents that were in the Classic? And one of the questions, the one you knew had to come out is, could she still go? Could she still get in the ring and compete? And she was very clear. She thinks if she had a month or 2 to prepare, she could get in the ring and still do it the way she always did. And I believe that. I think Medusa was one of the most underused, underappreciated, phenomenal female talents in the history of professional wrestling. And it's really a shame that her career was in a lot of ways cut short because of the issues with WWE and throwing the belt in the trash and WCW going under and whatnot. I know she has a fantastic career in the world of monster truck racing. I have no problem with that, but it would be really nice and very, very special to see her in the ring one more time. I did find it interesting that what she said, one of the things that really frustrated her and was really a personal issue for her for quite a long time, was the fact that she was so good in her prime and at the top of her game and the women's champion and everything, and she never had an action figure. You can name some really bizarre wrestlers who had action figures. Coco Beware had an action figure. The Bushwhackers had action figures. But Medusa or Alundra Blaze or whatever you want to call her never got an action figure. I don't understand that. You know, and I see why she'd be offended. You know, when you got people out there, Adam Bomb getting an action figure. The guy was a mid-carder at best. The Model, Rick Martel. What? But you don't have your women's champion? It shows the lack of respect that they used to have for the women's division. It's just my opinion. I'm going to talk some Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho returning to SmackDown last week. Very exciting. I was happy to see him. Now, the issue I have is he is not advertised for anything after this. However, Fozzy is not touring right now. They will go back on tour between October and November, and then they'll be off tour again. So I could easily see where they negotiate something where he could be around for a little while now, disappear in October, come back mid to late November. And I hope they do, because, and I hate saying this, Chris Jericho, if you know me and know how much of a wrestling fan I am, he is at the top of the ladder for me. I'm not going to say he's my favorite wrestler, but I think I have more respect for Chris Jericho maybe than any wrestler in the history of the business. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying he's better than Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan, people like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as a human being, as a student of the game, as a person who is able to transcend into other walks of life. And I don't consider your success level based on the fact that Hulk Hogan did movies and The Rock has done movies and made millions or whatever. Yes, The Rock is probably the most successful crossover to Hollywood, but Chris Jericho is in the music world. He's done Dancing with the Stars. He used to be one of my favorite people on that VH1's I Love the 80s or I Love the 90s nonsense. You know, he's done so many different things, and I just respect him. A successful writer, multiple best-selling novels, or biographies. So I have so much respect for him that I hate to say it, but I feel like his career, obviously it can't go on forever. He's in his mid-40s. how long can he possibly go at this high level that he's at right now? And the answer is as long as he pretty much wants to, because he's apparently a workout fanatic. His cardio is out of control, and he is just phenomenal in the gym. So I suppose he can go as long as he really wants to, but I have fond memories of every match I've seen of Chris Jericho, and I don't ever want those to change. So I'm hoping that they maximize their time they have with him, because I don't know how many more runs he's going to want to have with the company when, he doesn't always agree with their motives. I do want to get to something else tonight before I get into more news. We have not talked at all about the Intercontinental Tournament that is available online. As I said earlier, the voting is live now. Go to frowrestling.com. You can click on the Vote Now link. And by the way, I haven't said it enough tonight. If you want to give us questions, comments, or concerns, don't forget, call into the Fro Wrestling Sound Off line, 267-642-1160. Send us your thoughts. Give us feedback, ideas, topics, things you want to hear about. Let us know what is on your mind. We always love to hear from our loyal listeners. You guys are fantastic. As I say that, I almost on cue, and I love it because I missed this guy last week, and it was my fault for going on so late. Question from our man, Barry Harry Larry. And Barry Harry Larry, what are you asking this week? He says he's asking if WWE has anyone with a spine who's willing to stand up to Vince McMahon and tell him that all the last minute booking is killing the product. Barry Harry Larry, there is nobody in that company with a spine, if you ask me. Not anymore. Maybe Triple H, but Triple H, I think, has been. I'll use a Eric Bischoff term. Triple H has been sipping the Kool-Aid long enough that even he's not going to go up against Vince. There was reports earlier this year that he and Vince had some heat because they didn't agree about something with NXT, and I believe that. And I think Triple H probably didn't back down from the discussion, but at the same time, he knows where his bread is buttered. He's not going to burn his bridge and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think most of the writers are just happy to have a job, and they're not going to do something that's going to put them out of a job. I think in WWE, you've seen too many people come and go whenever they stand up and stick up for what they think needs to be done. The one guy who I think could do it is a guy is retired. He's not doing it anymore, and that's Pat Patterson. He was the guy who came up with a good chunk of the really good stuff. I actually saw an article recently on eWrestling News, I believe it was, that or Cage Side Seats, I can't honestly remember, where they talked about how Pat Patterson was the driving force behind all the creative genius of WWE for 30 years. And then when he left is when the product really started to tank, because he is such a inventive and creative guy, and they're missing that now. And you can't even lean on Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes unfortunately passed away, and his brilliance is no longer available. So WWE's kind of left out in the cold and not having a clue what they should be doing. Going to get to those Intercontinental matchups for this round of the tournament. For those who have already cast your vote, thank you so much. If you have not, please do so. Go to frowrestling.com and click the vote link. I'm going to go over some of the matches. First off, we're going to kick off with one that obviously it happened. If you want to say that. This is back during the time period when Bret Hart came in as the commissioner on Raw, and Bret Hart took on The Miz for the United States Championship. If anybody remembers, that's when Bret Hart won that U.S. title for like a day or whatever, which I found completely ridiculous, but whatever. But in this round, Bret Hart takes on The Miz. Interesting. I'm curious to see what you guys do with that. You guys have set up some really great matches. You're going to hear in this round that it's getting. We got 32 people left, and it's really down to the nitty gritty. I don't think there's a weak person in this round. There might be one or two that you're like, they have no chance to go into the end, and I agree with that. But you can't argue with the fact, if you really think about these guys when they were Intercontinental Champion, how really great the Intercontinental Championship really has meant over the years. Some of the best in-ring performers you could ever have dreamt to see. And you guys have kept pretty much all of them alive in this round. The second match that I want to call out, Stone Cold Steve Austin taking on The Rock. Yes, the match has happened several times, but I want you to focus on when they were Intercontinental Champion, the quality of their match, their skill set, whatever you got to do, and give me your vote. This one, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do with this. Shawn Michaels, HBK, taking on CM Punk. Wow. That's a dream match just waiting. Daniel Bryan taking on Triple H. We saw it at WrestleMania. It's only happened one time. Daniel Bryan came out on top. But that was not when Triple H was Intercontinental Champion. His tenacity, his fear, ferociousness, I think was a little different then. Daniel Bryan, you guys, is much more fresh in your memory, so I'll be curious to see what you guys do with that. The next one, Big Daddy Cool Diesel taking on JBL. I wasn't going to go through every single match, but I'm looking at these and I actually get excited reading some of them. This next one this is a horrible match. One of the two has to move on. I said there's not a lot of fodder in this round, but one of these two has to move on. But I want you in your mind right now. Prepare yourself. I want you can hear the music. You can hear the piano playing, and here comes the Honky Tonk Man to the ring. The longest reigning Intercontinental Champion in history. Honky Tonk Man, Jimmy Hart's with him, coming out to the ring. And his opponent, led to the ring by Marlena, is Goldust. What a bizarre, the androgynous, like, rub your hands all over your body Goldust in that full body jumpsuit or spandex suit versus the Honky Tonk Man in his blue, Elvis Presley jumpsuit. What a funky match. I actually am so happy that those two ended up against each other. I'm really curious to see what you guys do with this one. I have the Rated R Superstar. I have Edge taking on the Ultimate Warrior. Very cool matchup. Tito Santana taking on Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Never happened, at least to my knowledge. Wow, what I would have done to have seen that back in, say, 1985. This one is one of the highlights of the round. I mean that. Roddy Piper taking on Kevin Owens. I don't have a clue what you guys are going to do with that, but I would love to have seen that match. Same with this next one. The Crippler, Chris Benoit, taking on the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. There's a lot of parallels people draw between Chris Benoit and Dynamite Kid. Well, now you've got Chris Benoit going against Dynamite Kid's tag team partner, Davey Boy Smith. Owen Hart, the Rocket, taking on Nature Boy, Ric Flair. This next one, if you're an old school wrestling fan and you can appreciate the talents of Pedro Morales, the longest combined days as Intercontinental Champion in history, Pedro Morales taking on Kurt Angle. Those two would have had such a mat classic. Wow, what I would give to see that. I understand that Pedro Morales is currently living in New Jersey, having some Parkinson's issues. We wish him all the best. He's going through a tough patch right now, but what an amazing talent in his day. Former world champion, Intercontinental Champion, and tag team champion, all pretty much at the same time, right in the same time frame. Going against Kurt Angle, who did kind of the same thing, both in WWE and in Impact Wrestling. So, what a great matchup. We have Chris Jericho, most Intercontinental Championship reigns at 9, taking on Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig. Another match that didn't happen, at least to my knowledge. Maybe in WCW, but I don't believe so. But one that I would have loved to have seen with the two of them in their prime. I've got Kerry Von Erich, the Texas Tornado is what he was when he was Intercontinental Champion, taking on Don Morocco, the Magnificent Morocco. And I think sometimes people get caught up in the Rock Don Morocco at the end of his career in WWE when he was wearing, the Superstar Billy Graham tie-dyes and all that nonsense. That's not Don Morocco Intercontinental Champion. That's like the knockoff version that came out later in his career. Don Morocco was a fantastic Intercontinental Champion. The next match, Macho Man Randy Savage taking on the charismatic enigma, Jeff Hardy. And the final match of the round, and I'm just being honest, I'm reading this one last because of all the matches I've just read to you, this is the one that absolutely blows my mind the most. And that is Ravishing Rick Rude taking on Razor Ramon. What an insane match to have already now in the third round. You guys have done such a great job every time we do one of these tournaments. And if you can't tell from that, you guys have set this up to be really, this is a powerful tournament. Let's get back to some of the news. We got, we talked about it a little bit earlier, courtesy of Carol's question, the main roster back to NXT. That's something that's being discussed. So you got people, you've got the Tyler Breezes, you've got the Bo Dallases, the Curtis Axels. Bo Dallas was NXT champion Now he's part of the Miztourage after having a mid-card or less career for like the last 3 years. Send him back. Build him back up. Bring him back when he's ready to be a real contender on Raw or SmackDown. Same thing with people like Fandango. Fandango's getting a little bit old, long in the tooth. He started wrestling a little bit later than a lot of people. But a lot of these talents, Titus O'Neil, I think Titus O'Neil is fantastic, but they don't seem to think so. If the Titus brand thing doesn't work out, send him down. Bring somebody else up. I'd rather you send Titus O'Neil down and bring up Bobby Roode if you're going to actually push Bobby Roode. But there is discussion about sending main roster talents back to NXT to get reacclimated and get a new perspective on their career. I think that would be a great idea. I just would prefer they did it Carol's way. It's just my opinion. AJ Styles. The news about AJ this week is conversation about his debut at Madison Square Garden and the decision to put the United States Championship on him there, which apparently was made by Vince McMahon himself. And I think this was Vince McMahon's way of showing the New York City Madison Square Garden crowd, the crowd that has been his backbone of his business since, before he took over the company, going all the way back to Capital Wrestling Corporation and Toots Mondt and Vince McMahon Sr., MSG has always been the place, and I think he wanted to do something special for the Madison Square Garden crowd, and that's why Vince decided it was his decision, no one else's, to give AJ Styles the championship. But the article I read that in, which was on eWrestling News, goes on to talk about how when AJ Styles debuted at the Royal Rumble, Vince McMahon really thought that nobody was going to have a clue who he was. Vince McMahon, now here's the issue I have with that. Vince McMahon spends so much time worrying about WWE that he doesn't actually worry about WWE. And here's what I mean by that. You have a full team of writers and staffers, and you have coaches, and you have agents, and all these people helping you run your business. Your business is going to be fine one way or another. Triple H and Stephanie are doing a pretty good job. I hate to say that, but they really are. The reality is Vince is at a stage in his life where he needs to start watching out everybody else, because he's missing out. When you see what everybody else is doing, you see they're doing such a fantastic job, they may be doing something that you should be doing, and it could only increase the business that you're putting out. Because right now, WWE programming is stale. It really is stale. Even the top of the card. I'm thrilled that SmackDown's going to give us John Cena versus Shinsuke Nakamura. That's phenomenal. I love the three-way dance last week for the the United States Championship. I love that idea. But outside of those two matches, what have we seen lately that was really motivating? What? A tease for a Shield reunion? That's not doing anything. And I'm actually going to talk about that at the end here, but we need more freshness, and WWE is big enough and talented enough that they should be watching all the independents and taking things they see there, sprucing them up and making them WWE ready, and really giving us some of the best content in the history of their business. Instead, it's quite the opposite. WWE seems to go for the easy road, like this Kurt Angle, Jason Jordan nonsense. They give us the easy angles, the storylines that are complete hodgepodge of soap opera and Fight Club or something, and they don't give us anything that's real and legitimate and organic, and that comes from the indies. That comes from places like Ring of Honor or AAW, or going and seeing some Progress Wrestling in the UK, or going to see something in New Zealand. I don't know if you guys remember, but I used to put on these episodes, different companies for you to check out. I still do that for myself. I didn't put them into the episodes because the episodes started running so long, but there are phenomenal companies out there for you to check out, and I would love for you guys to do that, because there's a lot out there for real diehard wrestling fans. I'm going to move on to a tidbit I can't wait to talk about. There's rumors out there now. I've seen it reported on multiple sites. People always tell me, you got to make sure you tell people where you saw this stuff. Look, man, here's the reality about wrestling rumor websites. They all have the same junk, okay? Wrestling Inc., eWrestling News, WrestleZone, F4W Online, which is the Wrestling Observer, PWI Online, Pro Wrestling Illustrated Online, they all have the same storylines. So saying which one I saw it on isn't helping you at all, because they all have the same stuff. Sportskeeda and whatever. Check out whichever one you want. You're going to find every story that we're talking about on every one of those websites somewhere. So me telling it to you is not ruining anything. And me not saying, hey, I saw this on WrestleZone, isn't going to make it like I'm plagiarizing somebody and not giving them credit. It's everywhere. So formally, going forward, all episodes of my podcast, just check out any of those sites. They're all on every one of them. So, back to what I was going to talk about. Bray Wyatt and Finn Balor. The rumor that is floating out now, which I first saw on eWrestling News, was that they may be reuniting the Wyatt family with the intention of having them go against a reunited Balor Club. And we're talking about this right before Survivor Series season gets ready to kick up in around September, October. I actually think that would be a really cool way to get things going. You reunite Bray and Braun, bring Luke Harper and Eric Rowan, who've been doing nothing of substance over on SmackDown. And then you've got Finn Balor, and you've got Gallows and Anderson, and you would need another person. So now the question becomes, do you let AJ Styles help out because it would be a co-branded thing because you got, wrestlers on opposite shows, and do that at the Survivor Series? I say yes. I think they want to put AJ Styles in a more high-profile match, but I would love to see it. I really would. It's got that, or make it a three-way dance and do 6-man tag team style, but have it be, the Wyatt family, and don't put Braun in there because Braun's in a pretty good program of his own. Put Finn Balor with Gallows and Anderson and throw in the Shield. All right. I had to throw that out there because I'm going to be talking Shield at the end of the show. But that is the conversation right now, that the rumor is that they may be reuniting the Wyatt family to take on the Balor Club. So we'll have to keep our eyes firmly planted on that to see what happens. Great Khali returns at Battleground, chokes Randy Orton, doesn't show up on SmackDown, and is not advertised for any shows going forward. However, again, the rumor is that Khali is now going to be like the enforcer, the bodyguard for Jinder Mahal. I've already said it before. I think they are destroying any chance Jinder Mahal had at being a legitimate world champion when he has yet to win any high-profile match without assistance from somebody or some kind of bizarre, quirky finish. It really does crap on his reign, and I think that's kind of messed up. If you elevated the guy to world champion to begin with, then just give him a few wins. Like, good Lord, what are we doing here? I want to move on to Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's in the news this week because his former wife, his ex-wife, Jeannie Clark, who he was married to back in his original World Class Championship Wrestling days, and then she followed him into WCW, where she was Lady Blossom, the long blonde-haired valet that he had back when Stone Cold was just stunning Steve Austin with the blonde hair and the horrible comb-over. When they were together, she's the one who is credited with coming out with the Stone Cold Steve Austin gimmick. She was at home, and he was trying to come up with a way to change his character from the ringmaster to something more exciting, and he was drinking coffee, and apparently he let it sit there a while, and she said, you better drink that before it gets stone cold, and then she pitched to him that he ought to use that, and it became the biggest gimmick in the history of the business. Well, he's in the news this week because she wrote a book, somewhat of a biography, talking about her time and her entanglements with the wrestling business. And in there, she talks about the reason that Stone Cold Steve Austin refused to go to the funeral of Owen Hart, indicating in her words, and again, this is just her perspective. She could be, putting her own spin on it, but for right now, take it with, a grain of salt. But she says that Austin wouldn't go to Owen Hart's funeral because he still blamed Owen Hart for breaking his neck, messing up his neck, and taking years off his career and millions out of his pocket by injuring him. Even going so far as to claim that Austin thought that Owen Hart might have hurt him on purpose. I can't see that. Everything we've ever seen about Owen Hart is that he was a practical joker, that he was a fun-loving guy, a fantastic father figure, a real hero in the locker room, got along well with everybody. And I'm just going to throw this out there. When the Montreal Screwjob went down, Owen Hart was the one member of the Hart family who stuck it out. Because he was a man of his word, he signed a 3-year deal with Vince McMahon shortly before that screw job went down, and he honored his contract. Now, so there's a lot of people actually who wish he wouldn't have, because he may still be alive today and competing. But you can't take away the man's character, and I think that I'm hoping that her claims here are inaccurate, because I would hate to think that. I think Owen Hart is fantastic from everything I've ever read or heard about the guy, and I just think that would be a terrible reason for Austin to do that. And I've met Stone Cold personally. I had a great conversation with him at the Philadelphia International Airport at the Marriott Hotel about hunting and all kinds of good stuff. He spent a lot of time with me, and he seems like a really genuinely personable guy. So I don't know. I haven't seen that hateful side, so we'll have to leave that one to the wrestling gods to figure out. I want to get to an update on the Broken Hardy gimmick. Apparently, Global Force Wrestling's trademark requests have all been denied. So they tried to trademark Broken Matt Hardy, which they were declined because Matt Hardy put in for the trademark before they did, which he also got declined. But because he put in for it first, according to the law, he gets 6 months to respond. Well, that 6 months hasn't passed yet. If he secures the trademark, it means that Impact Wrestling would have to get his permission to ever do something with that character or its likeness or its use on television again, which I can't see happening because of the way things have gone on through this whole debacle that they've had going on for months. So, and then, they had other ones for Brother Nero, which got rejected because it's Jeff Hardy's middle name. His middle name is Nero. You can't say, hey, you can't use your middle name. And if your brother calls you Brother Nero, then sorry, that's legal. There was one for Vanguard 1 because it's got too much similarity to so many businesses out there and whatnot. And Broken Universe because they didn't clarify appropriately what they meant by Broken Universe. Whether it was a wrestling gimmick or some kind of program or what. So, for right now, nobody's got the patent on those items. There are applications in, but nobody has the patent on them. I want to get back to our questions. I have one more coming in right now. It's from Becky McGinley, 1999, who's asking if on the heels of Becky Lynch's comments last week about the women's TLC and women's Rumble, is WWE ever going to see I gotta try to paraphrase this because I want to make sure I get her full question out there. Basically, she's asking, after Becky Lynch made a comment about women's TLC and a Royal Rumble match, will WWE ever appreciate the women's revolution? And it says, and if I think the ladies will ever get a Mania main event. Okay, it's a lot going on in that question. Okay, first off, tables, ladders, and chairs. I don't see any reason why not, since you've got all three of those items being used in the Money in the Bank match anyways. It only seems to make sense that there will be a TLC match at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. The Women's Royal Rumble has been talked about for years now, and this year picked up a lot of conversation and speed. I would not be surprised if this year we get our first ever Women's Royal Rumble. The problem I have with the Women's Royal Rumble is they don't typically... Here's the thing. The Royal Rumble match itself takes quite a bit of time. So if you want to give the talents 2 minutes in between entrants, you're already looking at a 60-minute match. Plus the women, you'd probably have to do the women every 30 seconds or maybe a minute, whatever you're going to do. And then you got to have enough women to make it worthwhile, maybe 20. I think they could do 30 just like the Royal Rumble, but they're not going to because they don't think they have the talent to do that. I think that's ludicrous. If the ladies have proven anything in the last year and a half, it's that the ladies can go. When you give them the spotlight, they can run with it. To your last part of your question, the Mania main event, I think that we will not see a women's main event at WrestleMania, and I hate to say it this way, as long as Vince McMahon is alive. Not because they don't deserve it. They absolutely do. But, completely different segue, reason is that Vince McMahon has made his backbone in this business has been on his main events that have always been with his biggest singles male stars. I can't see him ever changing his perspective on the fact that that's what has always been the formula, and that's the formula he's probably going to want to keep. I don't see him changing that. So that's just my opinion. So I hope that helps a little bit. I want to talk about the conversation about the Shield. We touched on this a bit last episode. I wrote about this on the Sports Junkies 101 tsjsports.com. I really feel like this is a really tough book. So As we said in our previous podcast, it is the rumor right now that we're going to see the Shield take on Sheamus and Cesaro for the Tag Team Championship at SummerSlam. I also have heard now that they potentially were going to win the Tag Team Championship at SummerSlam, thereby reuniting the Shield and getting the fist bump, or whatever you want to call that, and, you know, getting that feel-good moment. And then I also, of course, this week there was conversation, there was some heat on Rollins and Ambrose, because they were too lovey-dovey, apparently, in the ring when they were celebrating their win over the Miztourage. Look, the Shield needs to be booked correctly, and here's the problem with the Shield. The Shield was 3 people, and Roman Reigns is firmly entrenched at the top of the card, and Vince McMahon does not want to move him out of there. So unless you squash Roman Reigns' push, you can't do a Shield and make it feel right. 2 members of the Shield is not the Shield. That's part of the Shield. You got to have all 3 members, and then once you have all 3, who are you going to put them against? The Wyatt family is a joke, because after Braun and Bray, the other 2 they're nothing. And it's not because they're not worth it. I think Eric Rowan is fantastic. I think Luke Harper is the most undervalued and underappreciated guy in the entire company, but including Dolph Ziggler and people like that. But it doesn't matter what I think. They don't want to push those 2. And then you look over, okay, so you get the Balor Club. Do you really think that Gallows and Anderson can hang with the Shield? Come on, that shouldn't even be a discussion. And the only way that works is if you bring somebody in who can face the Shield and give them a legitimate run for their money. Now, there is 2 options for that. One is the Authors of Pain in NXT. I could buy that. So if you're going to put the World Tag Team Championship or the Raw Tag Team Championship on the Shield and use that as a springboard for the Authors of Pain to get to the main roster, fine. I'm good with it. The other one is Sanity. If Sanity comes up from NXT and you have more than 3 members, now you've got the numbers advantage, and now I can see how they could take down the Shield. But it's got to be booked right. It doesn't have the right feel right now. This isn't really like the Shield. This is like a new tag team. Even though it's the same people, it feels different. It doesn't feel like the original Shield. So my article that I put up this week on this TSJ Sports was focused on that, because, you know, you got to be careful. Long-term booking is what's lagging in WWE right now. We need to see people who are creating information and storylines that are going to last for months, not days. And they can't be changing stuff every 30 seconds. Give us what we want to see. So that is my dialogue on the Shield for tonight. That is pretty much all the time we have for this episode. Please, if you want to become a member of the Fro Wrestling Podcast family, shoot over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Fro Wrestling Podcast to become a Patreon member today. We would love to have you. We appreciate all of you either way. Special thanks, as always, goes out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com. They produce all of our music and sound effects that we use throughout the show. Today's podcast, as always, sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side in this new game from Beazle Games by going to frowrestling.com and clicking the icon in the middle of the screen. And to alleyrepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for servicing of all of your classic skee-ball, pinball, and arcade game needs. This guy does top quality work. Give him your time and your business. He will give you a great piece of product back with a guarantee. How often do you hear that about repaired product? Be sure to shoot over to our website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs. If you're looking at college, university, or just a new career path and you need a little bit of assistance or some guidance to help you make the right decision, Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro. I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us today. And if you're looking for more wrestling news and rumors, go to www.tsjsports.com and check out the articles on the world of professional wrestling. Until next episode, everybody, take care and have a great night.